welcome back to the Everyday Night. I'm Joe.
And I'm Jeff.
And Jeff, tonight we are continuing
Yes.
the discussion of the worthies. We first talked about the traditional nine worthies, and then decided that the categories of good Christians, good pagans, and not as
so bad Jews.
Most Jews we're not what we were going to use, what we would use. So we came up with our own lists and created four categories: art, spirituality or peace, intellectual achievement, and some kind of physical daring do.
Well, yeah, something that just took sort of physical fortitude to accomplish.
Right. So four categories, three each. So our 12 worthies. Last episode was 12 worthies, our picks for 12 worthies across those four categories from the years 1500 to 1800. Right. Tonight, we're talking about our picks in those categories from the years 1800 to the present day.
Right.
So,
right, or at least I think I stopped at 2000, but
right. Close enough.
Yeah.
So, right. So the first question is, with what, pray tell, are you wetting your whistle so that we can discuss these worthies? Worthy whistle wetting.
Oh, well, since you ask, and since we kind of rushed to put this out tonight, I just grabbed a Hofbrau Dunkel beer.
Okay.
Been residing in my special fridge for several months now. Kept in a cool, dark, dry place. That's what you want. So, and you sir, what are you imbibing?
This is Primitivo. It's a
okay.
Red wine. It's I like it. It's
primitive.
Yeah, well, and that's the varietal, but it's a much older kind of grape. And it's the name, and I like it. It's got some fruit. It's fairly dry. It's good. So,
all right. Your health, sir.
And to yours. So, in what category would you like to begin?
Well, last time we started in the intellectual category.
Okay.
So, I believe.
Okay. That's and who is your first pick?
My first pick, Jonas Salk.
Oh, excellent.
The person who came up with the cure for polio.
Yes.
Changed the world and gave the procedure, the formula for free to every medical organization in the world.
Yes.
Because it was the right thing to do.
It astonishes me when I recall, I was very, very young at the time. I remember my older sister, may her memory be a blessing, had to have a tonsillectomy, and they delayed the procedure until the summertime because there was a correlation that they didn't understand between tonsillectomies in the winter months and polio.
I've never heard of that.
I remember that distinctly from when I was a kid, but I do remember Salk was greeted as a blessing to all of mankind, and to now, because people were deathly afraid of polio.
Oh yeah, it's a terrible disease.
And now for people to be anti-vaccine,
right? Well, for our generation, I mean, my parents, we all got a scar, right? From the injection.
Yeah, for some reason I don't have a scar from it,
Oh,
but I
I
yeah,
mean,
I might.
everybody I
Yeah,
grew up with had a vaccination scar.
right. Yep. And was proud of it. Glad to have it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sure. I mean, I don't, as a kid, I didn't understand what it was for. I just, I had to go
Yeah.
line up and get it like all the other kids. Okay,
Yeah.
that's just part of being a kid.
Yeah.
But it was essentially eradicated in a generation.
Yes. Yes. Until people started
Yeah.
being being idiots. So
Yep.
well, and related to that, my first pick was Louis Pasteur,
Okay.
because Pasteur was known as the father of bacteriology,
Hmm.
microbiology, and the germ theory of diseases. So he laid the foundation for public health, hygiene, modern medicine, all of those things. So really, he is in some ways the precursor for
Yes.
Jonas Salk.
Right. Well, many of the procedures and protocols that were used in that are still used in modern medicine were
Yes,
developed by Louis Pasteur.
absolutely, absolutely. Without, yeah, he enormous influence in his work. Um, and he also disproved spontaneous generation, which was
Yeah.
a common theory at the time, by showing that it could not occur in a sterilized vessel that was closed to the atmosphere. So really, really significant. So, um, who is your second choice?
My second choice is Bertrand Russell. I just I just admire him greatly.
Okay, please
He's a,
tell.
a philosopher, and I don't I hurriedly put when we started tonight, I didn't have time to get my list, the notes of my list that I had last time, the extensive list. But he is a philosopher. I don't know that he is necessarily an atheist, but he is suspicious of religion at every level, and talks about that in great detail. I could probably come up with some quotes. Well, while I'm doing that, who is your second?
Um, Charles Darwin,
Okay, very good.
because Charles Darwin, his um, his ideas about natural selection and evolution revolutionized the field of biology, and led to other understandings. And we've talked about how, for example, human societies evolved to be
Yes,
social, and so developed ethics. And because humans that did that had a greater chance of surviving and reproducing. So I think he had an enormous impact on a lot of fields because of that.
yes, yes, certainly.
Yeah.
But it's just a theory, right? I mean, yeah, I knew that would get you.
Yeah, yeah, because people not understanding that the word theory doesn't mean the same thing when you're talking about science as it means in just everyday speech. It's theory means the best explanation we have for something, and it's verifiable, and it
Right.
has to do with scientific process that people also don't understand. And so um
I had some, I just not even 2 hours ago, I saw some clip of a guy being questioned about, well, this is just a theory. He says, it's a theory like gravity and a theory like tectonic plate movement. It's a theory like bacteriology. It's a theory like, yeah,
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 it's a theory like all those other theories. Yeah. Okay,
yeah.
so Bertrand Arthur William Russell, third Earl Russell. I did not
Oh,
know that he was a
okay.
member of the peerage. Mathematician, philosopher, logician, and public intellectual. I wish I could get a job as a public intellectual.
There used to be public intellectuals. There used to be more of a role for them, writing columns, being interviewed, talk shows on television used to have public intellectuals as guests.
Right.
Now it's always somebody
Now,
promoting the latest.
now we're influencers. Now we have influencers.
Yes, but public intellectuals, there used to be a thing, a raconteur was also.
Yeah, a raconteur we would modernly you would think of as kind of a pundit.
Well, yes, and there's a musical on Broadway right now about Oscar Levant. Oscar Levant, composer, pianist, foremost piano performer of Gershwin. He was in, if you've ever seen the movie An American in Paris.
Yeah.
He is Gene Kelly's friend, the piano player.
Okay.
And he always played, that's who he was, that character, that sardonic, acerbic.
Okay.
But there's a musical, a play on Broadway about him right now, which I think is a fascinating character. But he was a raconteur,
Okay.
not necessarily a public intellectual. Public intellectual like Gore Vidal and William F. Buckley Jr. Remember their debates,
right.
Sort of thing. But yes, he was a public intellectual.
So he his book, he wrote several books. One of his most famous books is Why I Am Not a Christian, and it was almost revolutionary. Heretical. The church had all kinds of problems with it and banned it. But he also wrote Principia Mathematica, another weighty tome. He led the British revolt against idealism, together with his former teacher.
So Isaac Newton wrote Principia Mathematica. Did Bertrand Russell write his own version of it?
Oh, well, Russell wrote Principia Mathematica, a milestone in the development of classical logic and a major attempt to reduce the whole of mathematics to logic.
And Isaac Newton in 1687 wrote Principia Mathematica. So maybe Russell borrowed the title.
Perhaps. I mean, it's just Latin, principles of mathematics.
Yes. Yeah.
Maybe you can't copyright it. I don't know. So, but he also, I want to find some of his quotes. It might be just easier to search separately.
Okay.
Hold on.
Yeah. Well, while you're doing that, I will tell you my third.
Okay. Yes, please.
Albert Einstein.
Yeah, he's kind of an obvious choice.
Well, he changed the understanding of the universe.
Yep.
His general theory of relativity, so much of what he did changed our understanding of the universe in very significant ways. Yeah, kind of an obvious choice, but there's a reason that he's an obvious choice, and his energy mass conversion equation is sometimes called the most famous equation in the world.
E equals mc squared.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So here, Bertrand Russell is often quoted or misquoted or paraphrased without acknowledgement. But some of his, like, the whole problem with the world is that fools and fanatics are always so certain of themselves, and wiser people are so full of doubt. That's Bertrand Russell.
Okay, I have read that many times.
Yeah, in one form or another.
Yes. I think we see that every day.
Yes. That's just the same old quote over and over again. But there's
So who is your third
my,
choice?
my third choice. I actually, and I kind of shied away from the picks you had, and I think that those are probably better for our list.
Mhm.
I wanted to dig a little further and find some who were a little less obvious, little less famous, I should say.
I do have some runners up.
Okay, and I have a tie sort of between Friedrich Nietzsche and John Stuart Mill, philosophers.
So you really went for philosophy in a lot of
I
ways.
I did because, like I said, I wanted to
Yeah.
push past the obvious, the science ones, where the 19th century was a huge
Well,
19th and early 20th century were huge
I
scientific.
I went for worthies who not only excelled in what they did, but their work had an effect, a
Right.
lasting effect on the way their entire field was studied, was understood.
And
So,
that's I picked Jonas Salk because of what he did with what he found.
right.
That was an absolute boon to humanity. I mean, that,
I'd almost put him in the peace spirituality.
yeah, right,
Or,
was that important.
yeah, it
Um,
was. Yeah.
and Bertrand Russell just sort of, to
Yeah.
me, encapsulated the the Enlightenment was happening in the 18th century and led to this sort of logical, I'm not sure what to call it. He took it to the next step of logic and reason are what will save us.
Okay.
So he was important to me. But I think, like I said, I think the scientists that you picked had probably greater effect, and as worthies, they're more well known by the common population.
I didn't connect this until you're saying it, but Bertrand Russell, in some ways, I mean, connects. When Einstein was asked if he believed in God, he said, I believe in the God of Spinoza. Baruch Spinoza was a philosopher who, but he wrote about what he wrote very logically about,
Yes.
and that's what, and nature and that, and so in some ways Spinoza, I think, leads to Bertrand Russell in some ways,
Okay.
um, and connects there's an Einstein connection there too. So
Another, as I'm scrolling down here, another great Bertrand Russell quote is, "I would never die for my beliefs because I might be wrong."
well,
I
well,
mean,
yeah, as we've talked about before, the difference between a belief and a conclusion.
right.
So, belief requires no evidence, but a conclusion requires support. It has to be
Yep.
supported, right?
Right.
Um, so, who are your runner? Who was a runner up you had?
That was it. I had, like I said, I had that tie between Nietzsche and John Stuart Mill. So,
So I had several runners up.
okay.
Uh, Buckminster Fuller,
Okay.
who architect, systems theorist, writer, designer,
Yep.
and philosopher, futurist, a little bit of everything. Um,
I think
uh,
he's mostly famous as a futurist and an architect, but they were tied.
yeah.
He
So
designed the Dymaxion car.
he did, which I've seen. There's one on display, and his Dymaxion house, and of course the well-known geodesic dome.
Right.
Uh, he was expelled from Harvard twice.
Hmm.
The first time for spending all this money partying with a vaudeville troupe,
I like him even better.
And after
Consorting with actors.
yes, after having been readmitted for his irresponsibility and lack of interest. By his own appraisal, he was a non-conforming misfit. Which, yeah. I also thought Marie Curie.
Yes, I was going to mention Marie Curie.
She won the 1903 Nobel Prize in Physics and the 1911 Nobel Prize in Chemistry.
Yeah.
Two Nobel Prizes in two different fields.
Yep.
Stunning. I also thought Jack Kilby and Robert Noyce, the inventors of the microchip, because that's had a significant effect.
Yeah, certainly.
Sir Alec Jeffreys, who used DNA, created what's known as DNA fingerprinting, so that people can be identified by their DNA. That changed medical research and criminology and a lot of things. Alexander Fleming, who discovered penicillin. But I make him subsidiary to Louis Pasteur because Pasteur was the father of bacteriology. And Watson, Crick, Wilkins, and Franklin, discovery of the structure of DNA.
Okay.
Watson and Crick got the Nobel for it, but Rosalind Franklin was the one who found who was able to capture the images that they then used.
Okay.
She died before they got their Nobel Prize, so she's often left out, and I thought she should be mentioned. But those are my thought elect people and runners.
Yeah, you know, I was thinking about Marie Curie myself, but I wasn't sure, and I should have looked into it further. I wasn't sure if she was actually after 1903, so she was right in the middle, and I was thinking that she was actually around 1800. So that was just my mistake.
Yep.
So we have the peace category, spiritual category next.
Okay, good.
And I only had two for this one.
Okay.
Partly because I think Bertrand Russell actually, for me, overlaps into the peace.
Yeah. Okay. I can see that. As I said, I think Jonas Salk does too.
Yeah. Yeah. But my first one is Mohandas Gandhi, known as Mahatma.
Yes. Also on my list. He essentially creating nonviolent resistance, leading nonviolent resistance, led India's campaign for freedom from British colonial rule.
Yep.
Yes, absolutely. He was absolutely on my list too.
Okay, who's your second?
Elie Wiesel. Elie Wiesel, born 1928, died 2016. He was a Romanian-born writer, professor, political activist, and Holocaust survivor. He won the 1986 Nobel Peace Prize. The Nobel Committee said he is a messenger to mankind. His message is one of peace, atonement, and dignity. And I think
what was his background? How did he come to, what was he doing before he became prominent as a?
Well, he was as a child, he was interned in a.
No, but I mean, was he a writer? Was he a professor?
Yes.
Was he
writer and professor?
Okay.
Writer, professor, political activist.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah. And advocate for peace and a witness, especially to those who were Holocaust deniers.
Right.
So he was on my list too.
Okay.
Who is second on your list? or who's your second?
My next one was Nelson Mandela.
Yeah.
Pretty pretty obvious there.
I had him. I had a toss up between Nelson Mandela and Martin Luther King Jr. And I so I put Martin Luther King Jr. as one of my choices and Nelson Mandela as a runner-up.
I I think Martin Luther King Jr. had a greater impact in this country, and Nelson Mandela had a greater impact in Africa.
Yes.
So
Nelson Mandela cited Martin Luther King and
true.
Mahatma Gandhi in his efforts. Martin Luther King cited Mahatma Gandhi in his efforts. So they're very much connected, I think. I could have gone either way. I debated about that.
And that was all I had for that. Were just those two.
I have a couple of runners up. Malala Yousafzai, who won the Nobel Peace Prize in 2014. She's a Pakistani female education activist.
Oh yeah.
Who was shot by the authorities there, who the Pakistani Taliban, who were opposed to what she was doing. And her advocacy for the education of women has become a national movement. So I thought she was worthwhile. And then another runner-up I had was Greta Thunberg, the climate activist from Sweden, who her movement has also spread among students worldwide, among young people worldwide, calling for climate change.
I don't know. I don't know that it's fair to call it her movement. She has become an outstanding representative for it.
Her movement, her activism among young people.
Okay.
So she's a model for climate action by younger people.
Yeah. Okay. Right. That's what I'm saying. She's a very good representative of the movement to young people.
Yes.
And certainly worthy in her the way she started just by herself. She didn't join a movement.
Yes.
She began a movement.
Yes.
In her home country.
Yeah. Sitting outside the Swedish parliament with a sign calling for
day after day for months and months.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I think all very good, very worthy people. Absolutely.
Okay. And then I think we had art was our next one.
Okay.
The arts.
Art Garfunkel, Art Carney, Arthur Fonzarelli.
Wherefore art thou?
Yes. Yeah. Those are my top arts.
So. Okay. All right. My first one, I've got Beethoven.
And he was on my list as well. He one of the most well-known composers, bridged the gap. He transitioned from the classical period to the romantic period. I mean, he was really that connection there. Very, very influential. And he's
probably the best known composer of his day.
Yes. And born in 1770, died in 1827. So he is right.
Yeah, he's my the majority of his career is spent in the 19th century, but yeah, and the fact that he was for the last 10 of his 10? No. I don't remember now how long. Much of his life, toward the end, he was completely deaf.
Yes.
So he was writing based on theory that he understood so well, he could hear it in his head.
Yeah.
To me, that's what makes it amazing.
Yeah. And again, I think his influence was significant.
Yeah. Oh yeah. How about you? Who is your first year list?
Claude Monet.
Okay.
So Claude Monet, 1840 to 1926, a French painter, founder of what became known as Impressionism.
Yes.
Now, while my own preference for painting, the paintings that move me are tend to be more of the what are often called the great masters, the
More classical representative type.
Baroque, that sort of thing. What he did was he freed the painting from the obligation to follow the strictures of the academy.
Yeah.
And so significant influence and very important because he really opened up painting, for good or ill in a lot of ways.
Right.
But his work is absolutely phenomenal itself. His observation and understanding of light and color is very significant. So
Yeah. Yes. What
a bunch of precursor to modernism in a lot of ways. So
and also an impressionist on my list was Vincent van Gogh. Van Gogh,
yes,
right?
post impressionists, but
Post impressionist, but his you can see the link between Monet and Van Gogh
yes,
when you look at the paintings.
I had as a runner up, I had Picasso because he he experimented with and started so many different styles that other painters made their entire career on that one particular style, and he did a lot. But I think that Monet ultimately had more of an influence because he was the first.
Well, I thought about Picasso, but if you consider if you consider the person beyond the artist, he was
Oh,
kind of a jerk.
oh, he was a horrible person.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
So
and
that's why he didn't make my list as a worthy.
yes, I think that's a topic we should talk about at some length, though, is can we separate the artist from the art, the creator from their creation?
Well,
Yeah.
you're right. That's a good discussion to have. I absolutely can. But we specifically said we were going to consider the whole
Yeah.
person for this list.
But that's another topic for discussion.
Yeah. Agreed. Agreed. That'll be a good discussion.
So we both had Beethoven. I've got Monet. You have
Van Gogh.
Van Gogh, and
Excuse me, Van Gogh.
who is that Doctor Who episode with Van Gogh was still
Yeah.
one of the best. So
It's moving. It is.
absolutely moving.
Yes.
Yeah.
Um,
Who's your third?
my my third is Jackson Pollock.
Okay.
Um,
Okay, I get
but it
it.
was a, it was a close run between Jackson Pollock and Georges Seurat.
See, I think Pollock, who was derisively called Jack the Dripper
Yeah.
by critics, certainly had an influence. Given that whenever you see a painter depicted in commercials or movies, it's somebody throwing and dripping paint.
Right.
It pisses me the fuck off.
Well, he
you know,
Jackson Pollock and like that's the influence in some ways. He created almost single-handedly that image of the artist.
he did, but he did not create abstract expressionism, which
No, but he was the
I put more in the Kandinsky, who I think
yes.
fantastic. But yeah, he certainly had the influence, and but he didn't make my list.
Okay. And Surratt, who
I admire Surratt, but I don't think he had that kind of influence either.
I don't I agree. I would agree with that. I had him on my list partly because of, again, his he defied convention
Yeah,
and took a very logical approach, logical, not even logical, almost scientific approach to his painting, and and uh, introduced concepts of color and light and optics to his paintings that other artists were not doing at the time,
yeah.
and he was completely not understood in his lifetime.
Finishing the hat.
Well, yeah, and I love the play too. I love the musical.
Um, so my third choice is Frank Lloyd Wright,
Okay.
because as a architect, he changed architecture. He changed the understanding of the relationship that people have to buildings and the buildings to their environment. And I think the example of Falling Water, which is a house in Pennsylvania that is usually listed as the best house ever designed. It is all of that. It's absolutely stunning. I've been there, and it's phenomenal. But he really changed. He changed it, and he had a huge influence and
He
an impact.
he looked at, especially with Falling Water, he looked at the home holistically as
Yeah,
it, and he designed and built in most of the furniture in Falling Water. You can't rearrange the house. It's
right.
like the sofas are like, concrete in part of the house. You can't move
It's
it.
stunning. It's absolutely stunning. And yeah, phenomenal. It's worth a tour if anybody ever gets a chance to do that. And there is that one spot that everybody, that picture of it.
Yeah.
There's a spot there where you can stand and take your.
Take your own version of it.
Um, I did have a couple of runners up.
Okay.
James Audubon.
Okay.
So 1785, 1851. Most of his work was done after 1800.
Mhm.
French American self-trained artist and naturalist and ornithologist. And everybody knows Audubon's illustrations, which are just beautiful artwork. But his studies documenting birds, their habitats, and his images of them in habitat, and just the things he actually created the scientific names for several species.
Yes.
They're still in use. So
He's
he was a runner-up for me.
he's also nowadays somewhat controversial among conservationists, although he had a great influence on the conservationist movement because of, like say, all the studies and so on. But he would he would kill 300 birds a day
Yeah.
to do his studies from. He didn't do them from life; he did them from death. so
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 yeah, so
interesting character.
he was not. He didn't make the list. He was a runner. I also had Mark Twain. Samuel Langhorne Clemens, 1835 to 1910, often referred to as the greatest humorist the United States has ever produced. There is a humor award named after him that's still given out. His works are still considered among the greatest American novels that have been written.
Oh,
But
oh yeah.
he was, for me, a runner-up. again,
Okay.
because his influence was,
He was, I mean, he was a writer and a humorist, and uh, he gets extra points from me from being banned every 30 or 40 years.
yeah. um, I considered quite a few others. I think Mark Twain is the American Charles Dickens in a lot of ways.
Yeah, okay. I can
So,
see that. He did
um,
document lifestyles
yes.
of people.
And if I was now, I wasn't listing my favorites. That would be another discussion. Who are our favorites in these categories?
Oh, well, yeah, that
Yeah,
it'd
because
be hard for me to pick some of them.
that's completely different, you know.
Yeah.
Um, so because it was going after impact. So
Yep.
um,
Um, that completes my list of
yes,
artists.
fine.
And
Now,
our fourth category was the
yes,
physical achievement.
physical achievement. Who is first on your list?
Jesse Owens.
Oh, oh yeah. Wow. Cool. Oh yeah, yeah. Yeah, he did a quite a remarkable thing. Um, yeah, he was not only very, very good, but winning the gold medals in the Olympics, the 36 Olympics
three
in
gold medals, 3 gold medals while Hitler sat in a box cheering on his white Aryan
yes, yeah.
athletes.
Um, well, in that sense, I would have I have as a runner up um um Jackie Robinson.
Jackie Robinson.
But
I considered that too, but that Jesse Owens trumps Jackie Robinson.
very similar reasons. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Jackie Robinson, who broke the color barrier, and um,
But
it,
that his thing was uniquely American, Jackie
yeah.
Robinson, and Jesse Owens did it on a world stage. So I gave him the edge. How
So
about yours?
first on my list, the first cosmonauts and astronauts, the X-15 pilots group, the Mercury 7, the Gemini group, the Apollo group, the first astronauts and cosmonauts as a group,
Okay.
as
All right.
because damn,
Yeah, the final frontier, right? It's like,
well, and when when you realize the calculations being done by slide rule, and as if you've ever seen the movie Apollo 13, and um, most of them were test pilots and come out of being test pilots, and so
right,
yeah,
right.
um,
But you're right. It's,
entire
we're gonna put you in this metal can. We're gonna shoot you into space. We're not absolutely sure what's gonna happen to you.
yes.
Ready to go? And they said, yes, sir.
Who is your who's another one from your list?
My second one is Sir Edmund Hillary and
Oh,
and Tenzing Norgay, who
yeah,
was his Tibetan guide.
yes, his Sherpa, who
Yes.
first to summit Mount Everest.
So, yep. And that was a huge accomplishment at the time.
Similarly, another on my list is Roald Amundsen, who in 1926, Amundsen led 15 other men, and the group first verified to reach the North Pole.
Okay.
So very similar sort of.
Yeah. The explorers
Or,
and so on.
yeah.
That's a lot of what this list amounts to. I mean, we had a couple of athletes, just plain athletes.
Yes.
And
Well,
so,
I also considered Thor Heyerdahl, whose
okay, interesting.
Antigua raft expedition proved that transatlantic travel was possible
Okay.
in
Oh, more, I think more
Not
famous for his Pacific.
from across the Pacific. Sorry, not from South America to the Tuamotu Islands
Right.
in Antiquity.
Polynesian.
Demonstrate that ancient Polynesian people could have done that. Yeah.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
but
Built a boat out of bamboo or some sort of grass. This was in the 70s, if I remember right. Early 70s.
oh,
Was it?
1947. He did that.
Well,
He did the Ra 2 expedition in 1970, where he went from the west coast of Africa to Barbados in a papyrus reed boat.
oh, that's what I'm thinking of.
So that
That
was
wasn't the Kontiki?
no, the Kontiki was in 1947.
Well, maybe I mean, I remember as a kid,
Yeah,
I remember the special that was done on television with the
yeah,
papyrus reed boat.
yeah. That was his follow-up expedition.
Oh, okay. I've always, thank you. I've always, my whole life, I have confused those two things. I've conflated them. Okay.
Okay. Um, so he was a runner-up. Like for me, Chuck Yeager was a runner-up. In
Chuck Yeager was a fascinating character.
he
Certainly.
really, yeah.
I
Um,
I
Burst
read
of
his,
light faster than Mach 1.
yep.
Uh, yeah, absolutely.
I read his biography. Uh, and yeah, he was just did amazing things. He was also the first person to shoot down a jet fighter in a
Oh,
prop driven plane.
oh,
Now, the circumstances, like a lot of Chuck Yeager stuff, was he was incredibly canny about what he did.
mhm.
And he was flying a prop plane on a this was during the end of World War II. He was flying over Germany, as fighter pilots often did in both world wars, was just go off on their own looking for planes to shoot down. And he was flying over Germany, found himself, got lost, was flying over a German airfield as a Messerschmitt Me-101 was going in for a landing. He was above it. He dove down through the clouds, shot it less than 1,000 feet off the deck, and flew away. but he counts as a kill. It's on his gun camera.
He was um, one of the first ace in a day,
Yeah,
5 confirmed
yeah,
shutdowns in a single day. Um,
amazing. But and not particularly well educated. He was a lot of his. You have to be a pretty good mathematician actually to be a test pilot, and a lot of it was self-taught. Um, he was a self-proclaimed country boy.
my father-in-law, who I never met, he passed away um, before we we met and got married. He was a test pilot.
Oh,
He was a test pilot at the end of World War II, flying experimental jets. So in the Army Air Corps, and knew he knew the first group of the whole Mercury
hmm.
group of astronauts, the whole X-15 pilot group.
I mean, the astronauts, like we said, is one thing, but just, I mean, flying, it's one thing to be put in this thing and we're not sure exactly what's going to happen.
Yeah,
Early jet pilots saw every day what could possibly happen and still
yeah,
went up there.
yeah. Well, that's why Hal Jordan,
Yeah,
Green Lantern from Earth, was chosen by Abin Sur, or Abin Sur's ring, to
right.
his successor as Green Lantern of this sector. For people who, if you know, you know, if you don't know, so Green Lantern. Who was
These next two get off a little bit in the weeds. Right? Everybody we've talked to so far is pretty famous.
mhm.
Um, but I've got Alexander von Okay, let's give him his whole name. Friedrich Wilhelm Heinrich Alexander von Humboldt, usually known by Alexander von Humboldt. Uh, Born in 1769, died May of 1859. So he's
Okay.
early in the period. German polymath, geographer, naturalist, and explorer, um, linguist, uh, quantitative work on botanical geography, laid the foundation for the field of biogeography. So he's in the science category too, but between 1799 and 1804, Humboldt traveled in the Americas. Um, First people to propose that the lands bordering the Atlantic Ocean were once joined. Um, but he was everywhere. Um, but he was a botanist, right? But he traveled so extensively, admitted to the famous group of intellectuals, the Weimar, what was it? Cultural leaders of Weimar classicism. But yeah, he Humboldt was able to spend more time on writing up his research. He had used his own body for experimentation on muscular irritability,
Well,
recently discovered by Luigi Galvani, the galvanometer,
okay.
and published his results. So so he did all of these things while being a world traveling explorer, often by himself, just walking around in wildernesses by himself, cataloging flora. So I stumbled upon him when we were earlier looking through great explorers. I was looking through great explorers. He came up, um, but he Spanish royal authorization. He was in Venezuela. He was, I mean, Cuba, the Andes, Mexico, the United States. He has dozens of travel diaries.
Ah, cool.
So
Yeah.
so yeah, he's kind of obscure, but
Interesting. Yeah.
and you, who's next on your list?
Bass Reeves.
Oh, yeah,
Bass
okay.
Reeves, 1838 to 1910, the first Black deputy U.S. Marshal west of the Mississippi.
And one of the most effective ever.
He was born in slavery. His owner, George Reeves, not the actor who played Superman, um, his owner, George,
Right.
joined the Confederate Army and took Bass Reeves with him. Bass Reeves severely beat him, fled to the Indian Territory, lived with Cherokee Greeks and Seminoles, learned their languages until slavery was abolished in 1865. Then for 32 years, he was a federal deputy U.S. Marshal in the Indian Territory. Brought in some of the most dangerous fugitives of the time, never wounded, despite having his hat and belt shot off. When he retired in 1907, he had on his record over 3,000 arrests of felons and killed 14 outlaws to save his life.
Yeah, he was a figure of legend, or
Yes.
should have been.
He was the inspiration for the Lone Ranger, the story of the Lone Ranger.
Was he really?
Yes, he was.
I was not aware of that.
Yeah. And
He didn't have a faithful Indian companion.
no, but that we know of, but of course, having lived with the Indians and spoken their language, so
Okay.
the Native Americans, there's supposed to be a movie coming out about him, but I hear that every so often.
Well, they've got Idris Elba to play him. No matter, he's the only person that would be allowed to play him right now. If it was cast right now,
Yeah, I think yeah, but anyway, he'd be great in the role. But so he was on my list.
there was it needs to, you're right. It needs to be a big budget Western film. There have been some
Oh,
low
some
budget
terrible, yeah,
films.
yeah. I've seen, yeah.
Yeah. Um, and I'm trying to look up right now, and I can't remember his name. My next on my list is a gentleman named Richard F. Burton, not the actor.
Oh yeah, Explorer.
Yeah,
Yeah.
British explorer, writer, Orientalist scholar. So he traveled mostly in the Orient. Um, 1840. His times of service were 1842 to 1861. So,
Right.
um, uh, the Arabian Nights. Wait a minute. Funded by Royal Geographical Society. Burton and Speke is a partner. Uncharted lake regions of Central Africa, looking for the source of the Nile. Um, Lake Tanganyika discovered. So, uh,
Well,
very,
I hesitate to let the term discovered go
well,
on,
okay.
under.
The first white man to see Lake
Yeah, there
Tanganyika.
you
How's
go.
that?
There you go.
Yeah, and a sailor, and uh, he's the epitome of the Victorian adventurer. You know, he is dashing, and he's got this great mustachio going. Yeah, so it was just an interesting character, and I'm looking for, and I can't remember the name of the slave who
Robert Smalls.
Robert Smalls.
He
Smalls was his last name. Robert Smalls. I couldn't think of it.
was on my runner-up list,
Okay.
1813 to 1915. Born into slavery in Beaufort, South Carolina, he freed himself, his crew, and their families during the Civil War by commandeering a Confederate transport ship in Charleston Harbor, sailed it from Confederate-controlled waters to the U.S. blockade surrounding it, and then piloted the ship to the Union-controlled enclave in the Hilton Head area, where it became a Union warship. Then he was elected to the South Carolina legislature and then to the House of Representatives.
Yep.
Yeah.
He needs to be a movie too.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, he should be. So he was, for as Bass Reeves or Robert, they're both absolutely cool guys.
Team up movie.
Oh, well, yeah, they certainly overlapped. Wow.
Yep.
Wow. Yeah, they certainly did. Oh, that would be an interesting movie.
Yeah. But Idris Elba can't play both of them, so I'm not sure what they would do.
And I forgot I had a runner-up in the intellectual category, and that was Alexis de Tocqueville. Alexis de Tocqueville, the Comte de Tocqueville, French aristocrat, diplomat, political scientist, political philosopher, historian, best known for his works Democracy in America, in 2 volumes, where he traveled around the early 19th century United States and wrote about it.
Yep.
And I read that, both volumes, in high school. And
really?
It was fascinating, his observations about the United States and about Americans. It was really interesting.
So I remember when you said the name, I remembered the titles, but I never read them in school. So how far have we fallen from his observations? Because I remember he was quite favorable in his observations.
He also pointed out some of the he pointed
Weaknesses?
out some of the peculiarities of American character, if I recall correctly, like the independent spirit, the rather than the collective nature of the enterprise, and the contradiction. He pointed out the contradiction between those two things in the and so yeah, I think it'd be good reading for people to go to go back and look at what his very generally positive and hopeful vision of the United States was at that time.
Well, the early 19th century.
Yeah,
When was the French Revolution?
Middle democracy in America. See if I can find the dates here for when that was.
So he was
1835 and 1840 is when those.
Oh, okay. So it's a good generation after the French Revolution.
Yeah.
Okay.
So sociology, political science, but he was in my intellectual runner-up list.
Okay.
So, I also, on my runners-up, back to the physical achievement, physical thing, I put Harriet Tubman, because Harriet Tubman again escaped slavery, but she kept going back and freed other slaves and led them on the Underground Railroad to escape.
Very good.
Also, then she founded she founded like a retirement home, which she actually ended up living in when she was very old and penniless. But she was incredibly brave.
Oh yeah.
To have escaped and then go back to help other people. So also on my runner-up list. So
well, I think that's certainly not comprehensive, but
no, but I think we've well, as what we've tried to point out people who are worthy of being known as worthies, who are worthy of being honored and their achievement. I do think that this does lead to possible other conversations about who are our favorite exemplars in these categories, and who and about the idea of separating the creator from their creations, and how we do that. So
I would look forward to both of those as subject matter. So we will have to put those on our schedule.
Yes.
Tune in future to see us discuss those things. So in the meantime, you should be liking and sharing and, telling other people how cool this is going to be.
So until next time, be thou
a good knight
and true.